Welcome to the Idaho Main Street Podcast, where we talk about the issues that matter to you. Welcome to the Idaho Main Street Podcast. We're here today with former Idaho Governor and current U.S. Senator Jim Risch. Senator, thanks so much for being here.
Glad to be here. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I got my first start in D.C. as a college summer intern in your office. And what was interesting is you made sure that your team knew that although the office was located in the District of Columbia, you wanted an Idaho approach. You wanted them to operate like they were in Idaho.
Well, we hire most everybody from Idaho. Certainly in the personal office, the vast majority are. In the Foreign Relations Office, it's a little tougher, but we still have a lot of people from Idaho because that's got lanes that people are specialists in, and you have to go for a wider group there. But no, look, you got to dance with who brought you to the dance, and so we are focused on Idaho. Every decision I make is based first and foremost on how is this going to affect Idaho people.
Yeah. Well, how difficult has it been to take your no-nonsense, solve-the-problem approach to a city, an area that's not typically known for that?
Well, look, it's a legislative job, be it the state level or the federal level, is very different than an executive job. People always say to me, which did you like better, being governor or being U.S. Senator? They're very different jobs. And there's about a dozen of us at any one time that have been former governors in the Senate, Republican and Democrat. The ones who were in their state legislature before they were a governor, they move right into the Senate job, and it really isn't a problem. If they'd never been in a legislative experience, they're just astounded at how different it is and how the legislative democratic process is so different than the executive job. The executive job, people bring you a problem, you get the team around the table, have everybody give you the input. What's the problem? What are the issues associated with? What are the options that we have? What are the upside downside of the options? What do you recommend? What do you recommend? I chose doing number two. Go make it happen. That's not the way the legislature works. All right, they put a loaf of bread on the table, and the first thing you do is start debating about it, and it goes on for a long, long time, sometimes for years. And when all is said and done, you never wind up with a loaf of bread like you do when you're governor. It's you wind up with a piece of it if you're lucky, and it's a give and take process, and it's unique to problem solving. But look, we're all human beings. We solve problems like human beings do, and everybody's different.
Well, and I love the approach to you got to solve the problem, you got to engage in it. Most Idahoans, their understanding of how the government is operating or not operating is just coming from what they see, hear, or read. Is it accurate? Do you think is there a story going on in the U.S. Senate that we're not seeing?
It's hard to describe being as close to it as I am, but I will say this. I read the national stories and state stories too about how toxic it is back there and how awful the relationships are and that sort of thing. Nothing could be further from the truth. Are we polarized? We are deeply, deeply polarized on the issues. But as far as getting along, look, there's 100 of us in the Senate. Just as an example, a couple of times a year we have dinners with spouses. And so you go to the dinner, tables of 10, round tables, open seating. So the Republicans on one side of the room, Democrats on the other side of the room. No, it's open seating. You sit wherever. Out of the 100 people, there's only maybe 5 or 6 you hope, maybe I'd like them to. And it isn't on a partisan basis either, I can tell you that. But look, we get along very well. We're human beings. When we get together, we talk about what people talk about, whether you're at church or school or whatever. You talk about normal kinds of things, your families, your fishing and hunting and all those kinds of things. But when it comes to issues, we all represent our constituencies. And if there's one wish I had for Idaho people is everybody could stand in my shoes for a couple of days, because you'd come back and kiss the ground here in Idaho. I mean, you hear a lot of complaints about the legislature and this, that, and everything. I can tell you, having served 28 years up there in the state Senate in one capacity or another, that place runs like a fine-tuned Swiss watch compared to back in D.C. So But look, we're all human beings. We get through these things, and we're headed for an interesting rest of the year, I think. I've run 36 times myself. I've been involved in a half a dozen presidential races, either as a state chairman or a national surrogate or what have you. I've never seen anything like this. I mean, it's going to be interesting.
I listened to an old Obama advisor who was criticizing kind of what that administration had done, in that they hired too many people who look at the rest of the country with periscopes. Like they have to look at the country from a distance. Your office, as you mentioned, you dance with the people that you brought. You've stayed close to the issues. And one of the issues that you've stayed really close to recently, and making sure that even if you're not always in Idaho, you can know what's going on in Idaho, is this issue with the Lava Ridge Wind Project. Talk to us a little bit about when that came on your radar and what you're hearing.
First of all, I'm in Idaho a lot. I come home every weekend.
Yeah.
So I'm here every week. The Lava Ridge Project, my undergraduate degree was in natural resources. I had my bachelor's degree was in forest management. So, natural resources are not foreign to me by any stretch of the imagination. And I've had a lot of experience with it. As you know, when I was governor, I wrote the roadless rule for Idaho, which is in place now and will be hopefully for a long time. When they threw that thing on the table in front of me, it didn't make sense on every possible level. And so you start to think, what's going on here, and what's going on is it was a typical proposition by this administration, who you can understand really simply. People say, oh, this is so confusing. It isn't confusing at all. If you want to think about the Biden-Harris administration, think of woke and think of green, because that's all they care about. That is, everything they do, all they care about is woke and green. And so green, gosh, this is wonderful. They're like Idahoans. They value public lands. All I can see is, after looking at that, is the hell they do. That's 100,000 acres that they're taking and going to pollute with these towers that are higher than the Space Needle. What are they thinking? Well, what they're thinking is the other side of the coin. Oh, well, we need green energy. And I says, you don't need 100,000 acres for green energy. Build yourself a small nuclear plant that'll put out way more power than this, and it'll take up maybe 5 acres instead of 100,000. And then, since this energy that they're making is going to California, don't build it here. Build it in California, for crying out loud. Anyway, so the fight's on, and they have their neck bowed. And well, as you probably saw the videos of my go with both the head of the BLM, the tree spiker,
yeah,
and the woman who's Secretary of Interior. Both of them are just dead wrong on this. Somebody in the White House has said, you're going to do this, and they just got their head down and going forward. So if Trump gets elected, this thing's over, because within an hour, we're going to do just what they did to the pipeline. And that is, we'll have an executive order ready to go, and that thing will be ended. Yeah. If Trump does not get elected, then it's a bigger fight, and the lawsuits are going to go on for a long, long time.
Yeah, you referenced the committee meeting you had where you got the Secretary of Interior, Deb Haaland, right in front of you, and you were able to ask her questions about, if everyone in Idaho hates us and doesn't want it, are you still going to do it? And she seemed to double down.
Yeah. No, she didn't say yes, but she inferred yes.
Yeah.
They don't care about us. I mean, it is what everybody loves to hate about the federal government. I mean, what they're doing here is they're going to do what they want to do from thousands of miles away without any regard for those of us that live on the land. And it's heartbreaking, number one, but it also enrages people, and rightfully so.
Yeah, and the precedent that it sets, that local control really is just kind of thrown out the window. You always try to empower the state legislature, and so you've proposed, if the state legislature doesn't want something, then the federal government really should not do it.
Absolutely. It goes even further than that down. If the county commissioners and the local people don't want it, that's even more powerful. So, but they want these extra kilowatts in what they call green energy from this wind, which is, and there's all kinds of things wrong with that. The cost of those things, and the fallacy that building a wind tower somehow is a green way to do business. I mean, the cost of those, the amount of energy that goes into them. What most people don't understand also is those blades on there have to be changed regularly. And I've seen pictures of they've got these landfills where these blades are just stacked up by the thousands, and they're not made out of metal. I was surprised when I saw that. I thought you put a blade on there and that was that, but they have to be changed regularly. It's not metal; it's some kind of a composite that you can't even recycle. Really? And so, I mean, it's wrong on every level that there is. Really.
The deeper you dig, the worse it gets, is what it sounds like.
No question about it.
So give us some hope. You mentioned that this presidential election matters, but you've also introduced legislation. You've teamed up with the delegation, the Don't Do It Act. If anyone wonders what that's about, it's pretty clear.
Yeah, don't do it.
Don't do it.
Yeah, pretty clear.
Where do we go with that legislation?
Well, you know, those are always tough. What you try to do is you try to find a spot. When you're doing legislation in D.C., it is so different than doing legislation here. Here, you really can't you can't tinker with legislation and pull a fast one. In Idaho, we have a constitutional requirement that says one bill, one subject matter. Mm-hmm. So that's the way it is. You can only legislate one thing at a time. You get a straight up yes or no vote on it. Back in D.C., you can put anything in a bill. There's no prohibition on that. So they got everything from abortion to zebras in the same bill. Wow. And so you wind up always with a multi-thousand page bill. And it's awful because you're faced almost always when you're faced with one of those. It's a Hobson's choice. If there's stuff in there you really love, and there's stuff in there that you absolutely hate, so what do you do?
Right.
You know, and so Mike Crapo and I always meet before the vote. Our voting record is substantially closer than, well, a lot of states have an R and a D and they just offset each other. But we, out of the almost 5,000 votes I've cast since I've been back there, Mike and I have only separated, I think, on 3 of them that were minor pieces. Actually, they were confirmations that weren't even legislation. So we always sit and we talk and make a decision that we're going to, whatever happens, Idaho's going to get 2 votes out of it. So.
Yeah. And one of the reputations you have, not just working so closely with Senator Crapo, is when there's something like this you don't like, that your constituents tell you they don't like, that industry and stakeholders say they don't like, you fight like hell to make sure it doesn't happen.
We try.
But on the flip side, Senator, there are things that you know are important that your constituents and stakeholders tell you are important, and you fight like hell to get it. And one legacy you'll have is your advocacy for small businesses. Walk us through why these local gems, these small businesses throughout Idaho, you highlight and you try to empower and make their path to success kind of easier.
Small business is America. I mean, that's what we're all about. It's what our economy is all about. Small business is actually big business if you put them all together. If you wake up in the morning, you open the paper and you say, well, you know, General Electric is hiring 1,000 people today or firing 1,000 people. Small businesses do that before breakfast every day. You know, I mean, but they do them 1, 2 at a time, and they don't make the headlines. But they are the really the backbone of America, and amazingly, if before the internet, before the big box stores, if we were sitting here talking about it, you'd have to think that those 2 inventions, first the big box stores and then the internet, would put small business out of business. They haven't. Has it caused them to struggle some? Yes, there's no question about that. Has it hurt them? Yes, but they're still the Main Street business. They're still the heartbeat of this country, and so you want to do everything you possibly can. And when Congress does things, so often they totally ignore small business. You know, they're talking about a rule or a regulation that, first of all, you shouldn't be doing anyway. But secondly, big businesses can handle this. I mean, they got an army of lawyers, they got an army of accountants, they got an army of compliance officers. A guy that's fixing lawnmowers in his garage, he doesn't have the ability to do that. When he gets this 25-page form that takes 2 hours to fill out, it's a incredible burden for him, and they just ignore that. And I try to bring that to their attention every time they do that. And slap them around and say, think about what you're doing.
There you go. And it's seen, and I know the small business community appreciates the way that you try to fight back on the unnecessary regulations coming down the pipe.
Yeah, the regulatory structure is one of the subtle things that really influences businesses in America. When first of all, when a Republican gets elected president, stock market always has a big bloom, and why is that? Well, they know that we are just death on regulations. Look, we're supposed to make the law. Congress is supposed to make the law. Now there is substantially more effect on people's lives that happen from the bureaucracy passing regulations than Congress making laws. And so we push back on that all the time. Regulations are just a horrible, horrible thing. Now, are there some that need to be in place? Of course there are. That Congress or the state legislature, the best example I always give is fish and game regulations. Well, fish and game regulations have the rule of law behind them, and they should. The legislature can't sit there and determine in each of the game units what the harvest should be, what the shooting hours should be in days and that sort of thing. Same way with the federal level with weights and measures. I mean, we can't sit there making regulations on how you have to regulate weights and measures. So there's a place for it. But when you're doing horrendous things, these guys, you've seen them try this where they pass the president does an executive order saying, well, if you're in a business of manufacturing automobiles, 30% of your cars have to be electric by such and such a date. What the heck? That's not the executive branch's job. That's our job. That's a policy decision that's got to be made by Congress, right or wrong. So we are really big on seeing that we Congress are responsible. Elected officials are responsible for what happens, and the regulatory stuff. Lava Ridge is a good example of that. I mean, there it is, a regulation right in front of you that's biting us badly.
Yeah, we know you're fighting the good fight on that front. If we had time, we'd get into your good work on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, your work with intelligence. Yeah, another time I'll have to pick your brain on how you sleep at night, knowing what you know.
Well, we'll do this another time.
But Senator, I was privileged, as I said, as an intern to peek at your calendar here and there, and I don't know if I've ever seen a calendar so busy. So as we let you get back to your day, I want to just wrap up. You've been in public service since your 20s, and you've given your life at local, state, and federal levels to so many different things. What do you say to the people out there who are getting disenfranchised and disengaging on this idea of
That's a really
service?
good question. I'd say this: God bless America. With the problems we have here and the issues we have here, it's easy to get closed-minded and say, "No, this stuff is so terrible." We, first of all, as a culture, we are the most fortunate people to ever live on this planet. In the history of this planet, we live better, we live freer than anyone has ever lived on this planet. With all the problems and all the difficulties that we have, if you travel around the world, you come back here and kiss the ground. One of the things I always said is, if you really want to straighten out this country, require that every high schooler in their junior year leave America, go to a communist country that's a third world country, and spend the year there, and then have them come back and finish out their senior year. This country would be a different country. They would, first of all, have a real appreciation for what we have here in America. Look, we've been through a revolution. We've been through a civil war. We've been through 2 world wars. We've been through a depression. We've been through all kinds of issues, and we're still standing and going to continue to stand. And as long as we, the people, are in charge of this thing, it's going to go on. Is it ever going to settle down? Of course not. The Founding Fathers didn't want it that way. They wanted it so that we would have a robust democratic argument about how and where things should go. When it's over, we vote, and then we live with it.
God bless America.
God bless America.
Senator, keep up the good fight. We're praying for you. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Okay, till next time.
Be with you.